If you've been using MyFitnessPal for 3 or 4 months and the scale's not moving, you're not making progress, the app's not broken, I think the way that you're using the tracking app is. Welcome back to another episode of the Lean Life Podcast. I'm your host, Ryan.
And I'm Maddie.
And today we're going to be talking about the 4 main mistakes you might be making with MyFitnessPal. So without further ado, I'm going to let Maddie jump right in.
Yeah, let's dive in. So we often hear from people or get asked, or they say to us, I'm tracking everything, but I'm not losing weight. And that can be incredibly frustrating. As you and I both know, we've gone through it ourselves a little bit, but it's almost always one of these 4 mistakes. The talk for today isn't really to debate whether you should be tracking food or not necessarily in an app. Chances are, if you're listening to this podcast, you have already made the choice to track food. And so we're just trying to help you figure out how to track food more effectively and efficiently that will actually help you produce the fat loss goals that you're aiming for.
Love it. Well, cool. Let's jump into kind of mistake number 1 or talking point number 1 here. I like to call it the weekend blind spot. So Monday through Thursday, people track really tight. They're tracking everything. Nutrition graphs looks good. We see this all the time on client logs. Friday is where things start to, fall off, for lack of a better term, and get a little bit sloppy. We'll see something like lunch wasn't tracked or dinner wasn't tracked entirely. Or different things being logged and they're way over, but typically what we see is they're just not hitting their total calories or a complete entire meal miss, like lunch or dinner, whatever it is. Saturday then is half the days tracked or maybe none of the days tracked, and then Sunday flat out nothing's logged, and then back at it on Monday they're tracking all their normal food again. And so the scale's not moving, they're not sure why, and the math ain't mathin' when we look at it. So tell me about it a little bit.
Well, it can just be super frustrating. You're in your routine, in your schedule, Monday through Thursday. Friday, you get asked to go to dinner. Saturday, you're out and about with the kids or have stuff going on, or you're just doing yard work. And a lot of times we hear people like, I forgot to eat, or I didn't plan food for the weekend. So people get screwed up on the weekends sometimes. But that constant restart or that constant feeling of like, oh my gosh, I'm so perfect during the week. And then I fall off on the weekend and then they weigh in on Sunday. It's like, dang, this scale's not moving again. That can be incredibly frustrating. So we just realized that for people, it's hard when you are perfect Monday through Thursday. You see the weekend fall off, you will stay stuck in that cycle. And it's just a really simple mistake that people make.
Yeah, and I think one of the interesting things with that too, or the harder points to get across, is when someone's like, well, I didn't go way over my calories. I'm like, well, how would you know you didn't track the meal? And so they're trying to go back off of memory. They're like, well, I only had that one meal out. And like you and I were talking earlier about the what is it, like the oat bar cookie thing that you didn't even remember that you had a bite of yesterday. And I said, no, you finished that. And you're like, wait, did I really? And you're like, oh shit, yeah, I did. I actually didn't track that. It's so easy to do that. And so if you're trying to look backwards and it's Monday and you're getting your check-in from your coach and you're like, oh God, scale didn't move and I feel like I want to drop my calories. But then you're trying to think back of the meals that you didn't track on Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. How many different occurrences, especially if you have kids, how many bites, licks, and tastes or things did you actually consume that you didn't track? And again, it's harder to know because you didn't enter them. You did not do those things. So we can't actually see the numbers, versus where if you do track it, we can actually go and be like, oh, we had this and this and this and this and that. That's kind of the hard part, right? It's like you got to track everything. If you chalk this up to budgeting or expenses, you can't look at your budget for part of the month and then be like, well, I'm not going to track what I spent on the weekends, where you could be going over your budget for those days specifically. So
absolutely.
Getting into talking point number 2 here, eyeballing high density foods, high calorie foods. And I'm talking about things like peanut butter here, oil, cheese, butter, salad dressing, all that stuff adds up fast. You could get anywhere from, to 200 calories on the very low end or 100 calories on the very low end, up to 1,000 calories a day being off, just not knowing or just eyeballing those portions.
Yeah, super simple to do, even with things like, I think oftentimes we talk about foods that are higher in fat, like oils, cheeses, things like that, but also just simply chips and stuff. That stuff can add up so quickly. And it's not to demonize one food or another, but when you're eyeballing those portions, not paying attention to them, or you forget about them, like you just made that point a minute ago, we pulled out this little oatmeal cookie bar that was given to us out of our freezer. You had some of it. I had a bite of it. There was a little bit left over after I think you had some more. And then I finished it. And we were talking about it today. And I literally didn't even remember that I finished it. That's how easy it is to be like, what? No, I was so on par this week. I didn't eyeball portions. And then not realizing I'm not in a deficit right now anyways. However, when you are in a deficit, you're eyeballing and you're having things that you don't remember. It keeps you stuck in that cycle of being like, wait, what the heck? Why'd the scale not move? But you don't even remember eating the 200-calorie thing. You don't remember eating 7 chips that added up to 140 calories or whatever.
Yeah. And so, I mean, if you're aiming for let's say a pound of fat loss a week, or, a half a pound of fat loss per week, that looks like 250 calories. So for everybody watching here, I'll just break down the math real quick. It's you got 3,500 calories basically as a pound. And so to get yourself in a deficit, you basically need to eat that much less than what your maintenance is. And so if you go 3,500 divided by 7, you get 500. 5 times 7 is 35. Am I doing my math right? Yeah. And so basically divide that by 2, it could be 250 calories a day for half a pound. It's not that much. That could be something as simple as having a bite of a bigger cookie. Some people have these protein cookies that are like, oh, it's not that much. And they eat like maybe a little bit less than a half. So they're like, oh, I only had like a bite or a quarter of this cookie, when it's like maybe 300 calories. Or maybe it is only 100 calories, but then you do that once or twice a day and you do it a few times a week. And then all of a sudden you're like, oh, I lost like 0.3 pounds this week, and people are flustered by it, and they're absolutely shocked, not knowing that just making those little mistakes, eyeballing your food or not weighing things in cooked weight versus uncooked weight, and being particular can actually make or break whether or not you keep the needle moving in the right direction.
Yeah, we've had people truly shocked by that too, not realizing those little bites, licks, taste, like it all adds up over time. But honestly, the biggest fix here is one, not allowing yourself to eyeball portions, and two, buying a $10 scale on Amazon
Yeah,
and just
easy fix.
weighing everything that you're going to put in your mouth. If you're going to take the time to track food and work on a fat loss goal, just also save yourself the headache and weigh everything that you're eating
Yeah.
also.
Yeah. Go all in with it. And it's not to say this is a whole separate conversation, not that you should weigh everything and track your food always and forever. But if you are going to be in a period of tracking your food and utilizing a tracking app like MyFitnessPal, don't make these mistakes. Don't eyeball stuff if you're supposed to be tracking and weighing the food,
Yeah.
because then you're going to feel like, well, that didn't work for me.
Yeah.
And you're going to go try something else.
And that's just frustrating.
Getting into mistake number 3, point number 3. Got this written as the tracking clean food problem, or the clean data problem. So different from talking point number 1, where you're not tracking on the weekend. This is more so, for lack of a better term, we'll call it like selectively tracking or selectively logging your food within those tracked days. So you're not logging the glass of wine that you had, or you didn't log the chips because you feel like you only had a little bit. And maybe you don't log a meal that didn't go well, and maybe you don't log all the ingredients, or you went out to eat, but you're like, oh, well, I just basically had like steak and onions and I only had a few fries, so I'm not gonna bother tracking them. And so you try and like doctor up, for lack of a better term, what your MyFitnessPal looks like. The data is gonna lie, because you're editing it in real time. And so Maddie and I have both seen this time and time again, and people that more so, like, isn't to call them out, but like they will fess up about it. For instance, I coached a guy about 3 years ago, and he kept telling me, dude, I am tracking literally every single thing. And I was like, you gotta fucking shoot me straight. Are you tracking every single morsel that you were putting in your mouth? And he finally was like, no, I've actually been buying this little cake from Costco when I go in, and I'm getting a few of them for the week. And so I looked it up. It's like a 1,400 calorie cake. He's eating 3 of them a week. It's in a little plastic container this big. He's buying, there's like, I think like 4 or 6 of them or something, but they're little individual ones, probably super cheap. He's like, they're really good. Finally admits, oh, I've been eating them, but I'm not tracking those. I didn't think it was that much. And so we pulled it up together on a call and identified it. And I was like, bro, you're eating 4,000 calories right here in cake.
Yeah.
And it takes you less than 5 minutes across the entire week, because that cake you're eating, it's not like you're sitting and, oh man, this cake's so good. It takes you 20 minutes to eat like a plate full of Brussels sprouts and potatoes. It's like 3 bites of cake. Like a sliver of cheesecake's 1,200, 1,500 calories. It's not that much. It's really easy to do.
Yeah.
So
So when you're only tracking the things that you think you should be eating, or maybe you forgot to track certain things, you go out to a Mexican restaurant, you order the fajitas because you're trying to be healthy and clean, but you had a couple chips, maybe you had one tortilla, forgot to track it.
you're dipping your chips in guac.
Then you just have this moment where you get to Sunday, you check in, you weigh in, and you're like, oh my gosh, the weight's still not moving. And it seems so simple to fix, but I think it's really hard for people to want to look at it, which honestly brings us into oh, I guess no, it's not in our talking point 4, but what I want to elaborate on is just like you have to be very honest with yourself in this position where you can't lie to yourself or you're going to stay stuck in this cycle of being frustrated every single time you weigh in. You can't not look at the data,
Hmm.
unfortunately, because
Hmm.
the numbers they just add up.
Yep. 100%. Getting into mistake number 4, talking point number 4. Um, what would be a good example? The mistake here is having like the wrong database entry. So I'm gonna give another story about a client because it makes it real. This kid lived in Alabama and he was, again, gave me the whole, dude, I'm tracking absolutely everything and I can't figure it out. So for context, this kid travels for work. If you remember him or not. But I looked at his lunch and I said, hey man, is there any chance that you had like hibachi for lunch? He's like, yeah, I did. And I was like, okay, I looked at like the foods that you tracked and you said you went out for lunch. And it just seemed like this was kind of a you were trying to track that you had like hibachi. And I was like, so this rice, tell me about this rice. I'm like, you have 40 grams of rice here. It's 200 calories or whatever it was. Just tracked as like plain white rice. And he's like, yeah, that's exactly what I had. I had that steak. I guess they give you like a couple of shrimp. And I was like, okay, I don't see anything I was like, so this whole meal is under 500 calories is how you have it tracked. And I honestly just had to create the awareness from him. He was just so unaware of it. And so with that being said, something like hibachi, you know how it is here at Kobe Steakhouse for anybody that lives in Missoula or anybody that's had hibachi, you don't get 40 grams of rice. You're getting like a few hundred grams of rice. And especially if you ask for double rice, double cups like this big, it's like 4 or 5 inch diameter. It's probably 2.5, 3 inches deep. You're probably getting with all of the butter, oil, and then just the rice in there alone, I'd say, I don't know, 400 plus calories in one little thing. So you're going to have 2, 3, 4, maybe 500 grams of rice, or 500 grams of carbs worth of rice. That's a lot. It adds up.
Yeah,
And then
goes
you
down
have
quick.
the steak that's also cooked in the same butter and oil and everything else. And then the appetizers and then the yum yum or ginger sauce or whatever it is. And so wrong database entry, kind of. He just very, very, very much so under tracked that. The other thing that can happen too is maybe somebody has a home cooked meal and they do weigh everything out. But for this example, they'll track something like, I don't know, give me a good example here.
Well, I have 2 to give you. I actually just looked up one myself because I made some homemade, like, turkey meatballs, and I was just curious if other people had put those in MyFitnessPal yet, because you can in MyFitnessPal, people can make public entries of food.
It's like,
So when you're searching food, you can find other things people have made. So you could search meatloaf, and you might find someone named Joe from the middle of the country made some random meat
Joe from the middle of the country. Joe
from
from what?
Ohio.
Joe from Wisconsin.
That's the Ohio.
Joe from Ohio. Okay.
Anyways, Joe from Ohio made a meatloaf and he put all the macros in there and it's whatever. It might be different than what your recipe was
Mm.
or whatever, what you're eating out. We also have an example, I think, with a client of yours just recently. They were tracking asparagus and
Mm.
that asparagus didn't have any fiber listed in the nutrition
Yep.
facts.
Yeah, and it was actually so for context, this is my client John. John, if you're listening to this, not calling you out, I just wanted to use it because it's a great example. So he was tracking fiber, and I think he tracked 100 grams of asparagus. So that should give you roughly 2-ish grams of fiber, of dietary fiber. His entry said 0 fiber, and recently I was like, hey, let's increase your fiber. We're averaging about 20 to 23-ish grams of fiber a day. Let's get it up to 30. I want to see like minimum across the board, 30 grams of fiber. And so his entries, after I made that suggestion, he's getting like 27, 29, 31 grams of fiber on a daily basis. But on the days that he tracked asparagus, I was like, that's weird. It just had like 2 dotted like dashed lines. And I was like, oh, the fiber's empty. And so I was like, that's a bad entry. It's not showing fiber. It's not showing the micronutrients. And so that was like not as catastrophic of an entry or a mistake, if you will, but it was basically shorting his fiber. So like when I go look at his food logs, unless I catch that, I'm like, oh God, he's not hitting his fiber. Well, you could just be actually eating whole food and making really good decisions, but you got the wrong food entry. On the contrary, you could have something like, let's say you're cooking eggs or you're cooking some sourdough and you use a little bit of oil in your pan, or you use a lot of oil in your pan in this case, because you type in 30 grams of olive oil and that would be like 30 grams of fat.
Mm-hmm.
But somebody might have created an entry that says 4 grams of fat. And so it's like 30 grams of olive oil, 4 grams of fat. That would be hundreds of calories off. And that's unfortunately what happens sometimes is people have shitty MyFitnessPal entries. And so
And if you don't know that or you don't have awareness around that, that can be a really frustrating mistake that will hold a lot of people
Hmm.
back because you will learn more about food as you track and as you look at nutrition labels. But when you're starting out, you track the oil, you track chicken breast, and the chicken breast says it's 19 grams of fat, and it's like, well, that's just not true.
Yep.
It's frustrating, I think, as like a big mistake you see a lot of people go
Hmm.
through.
Yeah. So vet those, scan barcodes when you can. Try and find a verified food database. If you're curious or it seems off, I mean, I know it seems like a lot, but again, these are all people that are watching this are going to be people that are actually trying to track their food accurately and make progress. Type in U.S. basically whatever food. So if you want to look up sirloin, like a very common one I'll see is somebody goes out for a meal and they track ribeye. They type in ribeye and it says 48 grams of protein, 4 grams of fat. I'm like, not a chance,
Mhm.
especially not when you're eating ribeye, let alone sirloin or something else that actually truthfully is a leaner meat. It's still going to be much higher in fat. If you're getting 50 grams of protein, you're not getting 4 grams of fat. You got to be eating like tilapia or something else like that to be getting that much protein for that little of fat, or like packaged tuna or something like that. So it can be super frustrating, just like you're saying. But I think that about wraps it up.
Absolutely. I think to your point too, you were just saying like you can look it up and verify with the USDA
Hmm.
nutrition database, which helps a lot. So you can see what the macros are actually and not what some Joe in Wisconsin
Yeah,
typed into
yeah, Joe from
MyFitnessPal.
the middle of the earth.
But the biggest thing here is like a lot of women or men too tracking in MyFitnessPal. It's like you start tracking your day and you're like, this is what you think that's what your day should look like or actually looks like. But the little things that add up, the things you mistracked or didn't track, the biggest thing with MyFitnessPal and kind of mitigating some of these mistakes is just becoming so radically honest with yourself and what you're having. Very simply put, the thing I had yesterday, completely forgot about it.
Hmm.
So simple. But if I was in a fat loss phase and that was high enough calories to put me out of my deficit and not help me lose weight on the scale, that would be so annoying.
Hmm.
And it's such a simple mistake to fix is just becoming honest with yourself, looking at the data, learning, and going from there.
Okay, well, I think that finally brings us to an end, keeping this episode a little bit shorter. Fix those 4 mistakes. If you have trouble on tracking, you're not sure what food entries to have, shoot Maddie and I or DM. We're always happy to help or just point you in the right direction. But keeping this episode a little bit shorter, like I said, thank you again for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.